I consider my garden to be a biodiverse garden, not because of the variety of plants that are growing in the garden, and not just because of the actions of trying to make living soil, but it's also when I come up into my garden and I start to see all the bees flying around, just getting the pollen. I see some of the grasshoppers jumping. I see the ants moving around. I see the roly polies moving. I see all these varieties of things just kind of living and surviving in different ways. Yeah, that's when I started to think about, okay, this garden is a biodiverse garden now. We really have some life. Coming into this garden, it's just not plants, but it's just the entire ecosystem. If you guys been following this channel, I have been growing the canna plant for over a decade of my life and teaching and assisting people how to grow that plant. In the last few years, it's become more difficult for me to actually grow that plant. So I've shifted my energy to growing vegetable gardens. And this is, I would say now, my second vegetable garden. I've grown 100% without assistance, in a sense, throughout my entire life. Normally, it's my father that's growing. And some of the things I've just at this point, it might not look like it, but there's about 200 separate plants growing and about 35 separate varieties of plants in this garden right now. And every single day I come into this garden not knowing how to grow squash plants, not knowing how to grow the difference between a long neck squash or a golden, I don't even know the names of some of these squash plants, right? There's winter squash, and then there's zucchini, and then there's yellow zucchini, and then there's summer squash. I mean, I probably have already mentioned some of these things and being incorrect on them. My point to though is that my fundamentals have not changed. I'm still coming into this garden every single day, staying with the fundamentals. Okay, do these plants look thirsty? What does the top of the soil look like? Are there plants that are overgrowing other plants? Do some plants need to come out? Do I need to make room for other plants? Because I was doing square foot gardening, and that's initially how I started with all these plants. Some of these plants, and also not knowing the varieties of plants and whether they're going to do well in this environment, some of the plants have already lived past their life cycle. For example, as you can see, so you can start to see some of the plants bolting, right? Already starting to go to seed. Well, do I want to go through the efforts of collecting the seed this year? Most likely not. And if I remove that foliage, what is it going to do, right? It's going to help reduce the humidity inside these plants so that the other plants can grow a little bit more, a little better. I'm just paying attention to the things I know, right? For example, the tomato plants. Well, there's indeterminate and determinate tomatoes. Some plants are going to keep growing, basically. Other plants are going to stop growing at a certain height. Well, these plants obviously are going to keep growing. Me not knowing the exact difference, and obviously next year the garden's going to look so much different. I'm going to definitely take trellising up to 8 feet. Sorry for the noise in the background, guys. It is about creating content now where I live. But my point is that you know, next year I'm going to change it around. I'm definitely not going to use the yo-yos, even though I love the yo-yos. I'm going to take trellis netting, take it up 8 feet. I'm going to be training my plants a lot better. I'm going to be removing the growing tips. But this year, right now, I'm staying aware of the basic fundamentals. Just yesterday, I removed my shade cloth, which is normally right there, and I removed it and I put a trellis netting. Well, as you can see, all these tomato plants now are starting to grow above the trellis netting. And you know what? For me this year, that's going to create the support I need. Hopefully those tomato plants fall over on those trellis nets or some level. Then I'm hoping like the tomatoes hang or some level on that trellis netting and support themselves. I guess my point to all of this, guys, is that every single day I'm coming out here with a mindset in this garden, paying attention to the leaves of the plants. Certain plants, they might be starting to get a little bit of mold, like for example this one right here, as you see. And it's like, what can I do to reduce the humidity in these environments? I could probably remove a little bit of foliage off the tomato plants, increase the airflow to the foliage underneath. That's not going to take away from anything up top. The plant's still going to produce fruit. I guess my point to what I'm trying to say, guys, is that I don't get overwhelmed. Even though this is my second garden, even though I'm growing probably 200 plants over 35 varieties, I'm not getting overwhelmed. I try to ask myself very basic questions, like for example, this growing tip that's starting right here. I'm asking myself, like, do I want a whole nother branch growing right there? No, heck no. I'm already dealing with, like, I'm already dealing with this plant and all these other plants that behind it. I don't need another problem. So I'm going to remove it. That's going to help alleviate some of the stress I'm dealing with. And then this growing tip behind it, right here, I'll probably end up removing that as well, right? It's another branch I'm going to have to deal with, and I don't want to deal with more branches. I have too much foliage already, and I kind of have to make the decision. Do I want some crop, or do I want really high quality crop of whatever I get, or do I want everything to overgrow itself and I want no crop? So it's kind of about just being selective. Anyways, the noise is kind of getting a little worse in the background. I'm gonna let you guys go. Have a great grow, everyone.
So your growing style would determine your plant count for the square footage that you have chosen. These grow style choices not only determine how many plants you can grow, but also will determine major environmental contributions to the tent and or environment. So when it comes to ducting, the number of sharpness or the bends of really needs to be factored for the airflow resistance. And a quick example is a 30-degree bend can reduce airflow by as much as 20%, while a 90-degree could be as much as 60%. pH, the pH of the water and soil will affect the uptake and the availability of the nutrients. We've all seen this chart so many times, not going to go too deep into it, but it just basically correlates the pH in which the nutrients are potentially more available or where they start becoming less available.